Welcome, Empowered Healer, to another sacred conversation here on the Empowered Healer podcast. I am Songbird Grandmother, and today we begin a deep journey into the heart of psychic gifts, the sacred abilities that shamans, healers, and mediums carry through lifetimes and lineages. All of us have intuitive gifts. Some of us hear, some of us see, some of us feel, and some of us just know. These gifts are not accidents. They are the soul's way of speaking to us, reminding us that the veil between the seen and unseen is thin, and that spirit always finds a way to communicate. Today, we are going to open the library of psychic language, the clairs and beyond. You may hear yourself in these descriptions. You may discover a gift you've overlooked, and you may finally feel validated that what you've been sensing your whole life is real, sacred, and waiting to be claimed. So welcome back. I do have to share just a short story of when I really had to come out as a healer, and it was a real squeeze, like giving birth. I was birthed in to this new reality of being seen in the world as a psychic. And that word triggered me because back then, now we have all these like very inventive names. People are really reclaiming, the word priestess and shaman and healer and change maker, and there's just all these like dynamic words. And now I have empowered healer. But back then it was very raw. It was like psychic. That was what everybody thought. And when you had that picture of a psychic, it's like the lady with the big turban on her head, and she's got her tarot cards, and she's kind of a scam artist, right? And that the picture I had. And so I had a wellness center, and I had a guy come and put, our offerings on the window in big words. And the first word was psychic. And I remember looking at that word and just be like, oh my gosh, what has my life become? Because it was just in my face. And I remember having such a big trigger and reaction to it. And it was like, why is there no other word for what it is? Because when I was talking to the guy, he said, well, nobody knows really what a shaman is, but people know what a psychic is. And he said, if you want to attract business, you have to use that word. And from that moment on, when I put that word on my business, the frequency really changed. And I noticed the people that were drawn in, it was either hit or miss. And people were literally drawn to that place. I literally had people come out of their car, dazed and confused, wandering around in the front of it. And I'd open the door and I'd say, can I help you? You obviously look like you're looking for something. And they're like, this is the weirdest thing, but I was drawn to this place. I've never been here. I was driving and something told me to pull into this parking lot. And I stopped right here and I have no idea why. And it was always because they needed a reading, they needed a healing, they needed guidance. One lady, she had just broken up with her boyfriend. Other clients were lost, confused, going through job changes, health problems, relationship problems. And it began really with me announcing that frequency. And for better or worse, the word psychic, it invokes an energy, and it is usually triggering for many, and it can also be comforting. If you're going through what I just described, it was a comfort. So today we're going to go into what is not just psychic, but what does it really mean to walk the path of someone who is in between worlds? So psychic gifts are not like supernatural special powers. They are natural senses of the soul. They are part of our human being. Just as we have five physical senses of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, we have spiritual senses that mirror and expand them. So if you look at your hand, you have five fingers. Those are the five seen senses. But then you'll notice there's a space between each finger, and those are your psychic senses. Shaman, healers, and mediums each work with these senses differently depending on their calling. And psychic abilities are doorways. They allow us to perceive beyond the material world into the energetic, spiritual, and ancestral realms. And every psychic has different abilities. Okay. But everybody has psychic powers, like psychic gifts. They have inclinations. Some inclinations are very dull, and some are very sharp, depending on development. Okay. And the deeper you develop your gift, the more strange you will become. And then that's where mastery comes in, because I've had all kinds of people come to me and talk about their psychic gifts. And one of the most troubling ones when I hear it is when people say, I hear them all the time and they're driving me crazy. And then I know, well, that's when you have a problem. You shouldn't be hearing voices all the time and they're driving you crazy. You shouldn't be hearing spirits that are telling you to do bad things. That's when we know it's not a psychic gift, and we're starting to go into spiritual possession and spiritual delusions and psychosis and stuff like that. But your psychic gift, if you develop it, will become stronger and stronger, but your spirit and heart and soul also rise to the occasion. So, what I would like to say is, if you have psychic gifts, if they are intensifying, if you are at that point where you are being affected by it, then just know that you need to step into training. You need to reach out, you need to research, you need to look for a teacher. Because if you do this on your own, it will be much harder. It'll be a hard, arduous road, and you may never get out of that place of sensitivity, oversensitivity. I live in Sedona, and I would say probably about 85 to 90% of the healers here are uninitiated and suffer greatly. Some of them are very grounded, and it's hard to find that actually. But the majority of people here, they're struggling alone, and they shouldn't be. There are some really talented, amazing humans here. But one of the reasons that I do hold a space here is because I see that a lot of them have not done the trauma work, the shadow work, or have even really had the support and the guidance of what their gift is. They've kind of just meandered around and found various teachers or workshops or meetings or gatherings or meditations, but they haven't really coalesced it into a solid practice and foundation. And as I've talked about in previous podcasts, your foundation is very important. It's very important because when you have a very good, solid foundation, it doesn't matter where you go and what you explore, because you'll have the basics. And that's what everybody who has psychic abilities that are intensifying, especially at this time, especially if you started to really feel it around 2020 when the global shutdown happened. It was when the intensity of the ascension and the awakening was really hot, like really hot. And that's why we had a global shutdown. That's what it was. It was equinox 2020, March 2020. That was when things really intensified. And also it was 2012. Mine was more like 2009, 2010 to prepare for 2020. And for 5 to 7 years, I kept getting messages before 2020 about that time. And really, right now, especially if you're listening, your psychic abilities are getting hotter. And so we're going to go into that. So most people are familiar, like kind of psychic 101 is the clairs, the clairsentience, the clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, visions, images, symbols, dreams, and they carry messages, right? They often appear as mental pictures, flashes of light, vivid dreamscapes. Uh, these are really common with shamans and mediums, seeing spirits, visionary journeys. And when we think of a classic psychic, that's probably the one that people think of with I can see. Seers, we see your future and we see your past, see where you are, right? The clear seeing. But not everybody has that. In fact, I would say most women specifically have more of the clairsentience, which is the clear feeling. It's an emotion, it's an energy, it's physical sensations they feel from others. That's what they call the empath. And those are healers that are gifted to feel where energy is blocked or heavy, and they live primarily through the feeling. I don't see it, but I can feel it. And what I always say about clairsentience and empaths is that this is one of the strongest gifts you can have for healing because you can transmute heavy feelings, heavy burdens. And how you know that is when they say, wow, I feel so much better. And then you feel so much worse because you've transmuted it. Unfortunately, where it transmuted is in and through your field. And then now you have to cycle it out. And mastery of the empath, clairsentience, is when it no longer goes into your field, that your field becomes so strong, so vibrant, so resilient that once it hits your field, it just automatically dissolves and transmutes. And that takes, a lifetime of really working on your field. So when you have clairsentience, your diet matters more, your fasting. You really can't have a lot of social media or gloom and doom or harsh videos, argument. Like the best scenario for an empath, and this is why so many empaths are hermits, is your own field and probably working on things like Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, even like stronger things like kickboxing to learn how to fight back those energies. Tai Chi is really good because it teaches you how to absorb energy without taking it on. But when you have clairsentience and you're an empath, you just feel everything. And especially when your gifts are turning on, you're just going to be like an emotional wreck because you're feeling everything, especially at a time like this when everything's so heightened. So if you do have that gift, which is probably 80% of people who have clairs, they have that, then it's really important for you to work on developing a stronger mind, body, spirit. The next one is clairaudience, and that's clear hearing, hearing words, phrases, tones, music, or just whispers. Sometimes in the dream time, you'll hear like a whisper, or you'll be walking and you'll hear a whisper, or a song will pop in. And it can be really subtle, like your own thoughts, or you can literally hear an external voice in the room. And mediums often channel loved ones through this sense. I've even had visions sometimes where I've been doing readings with people and I see the ancestor whispering in their ear. And I'm like, oh, your ancestor has been giving you messages and they've been coming through your ear. And they'll stop and they'll be like, is that why I keep hearing this song? Or is that why I keep, thinking this thought? Or is that why they keep telling me this? And they didn't know where that voice was coming from. But then once we identified who it was, then it put it all together. So clear hearing is not always the primary gift, but sometimes it is. For some people it is. And a lot of times, like for me, it's more of like a supplement. It's part of it. Because ultimately you have all of them, right? You might have one that's more dominant than other, but you have most of these. One might be more like prevalent. And I think it's funny when people always say, well, I have all the clairs. I'm like, yeah, everybody does. It's just to the ability and degree. You can have all the clairs and they're undeveloped, and you can have all the clairs and they're like sharp. And that's the whole goal of the healer's path, is to sharpen your abilities, your gifts. The next one is claircognizance, which is just the clear knowing. It's the pure intuitive knowing without evidence, or what they also call downloads, sudden insights, certainty that comes from spirit, those aha moments. And this is really used a lot in ceremony, because sometimes when you're just embodying spirit and you're moving through ceremony, it's just clear. And I often hear other shamans talk about that clarity, where it's like you step into a world of technicolor and you just can see everything so vibrant and it's so clear. It's no muddied water. It's just, and that's a hard one to describe because most of our lives are not lived like that. There's always kind of doubt, uncertainty. Well, we'll see what happens. But when you're in a clear space of just clear cognizance and you're just no doubt, it's a high. It's a real high, because imagine if our whole life could be lived like that. And when we're in ceremony and we're really working with these high frequencies and we're bringing down these these spirits, these gods, these goddesses, these incredible beings, and you see how they see the world, it's beyond anything we as humans know. It's beyond it because it's so clear. It's a space that is, as a shaman, it's the place that we live for. Because sometimes the material world is very hard with these gifts, but when you're in the spirit world, it's you're flying. And I know those of you who had those experiences know what I'm talking about. And the clairaudience, which is the clear smelling. Now, this is probably my least favorite gift because I remember I used to go to like places with my mom because she loves, she's Korean, so she loves fish and seafood. And the smell, oh, I cannot stand the smell of the fish, the dead fish, the rotting fish. That is one smell, and I call this one dog nose, for those of you who see my TikTok video. It's so pungent, and I'm always the one to say, ooh, what's that smell? Ew, what is that? And it's always the not so pleasant smells, but smells like, you can smell a bad spirit. It just, ew, you're like, ew, what's that smell? And nobody around you will smell it. But then on the opposite end, you can smell grandma's perfume or something like that too. You can be like, oh, your grandmother wore this kind of musky perfume. Yes, she did. So smelling sense, they're also like physical. They could be incense, flower, tobacco. I know that's probably a common one a lot of you experience because I'll be outside and I'll just whatever outside and nobody will be around and I'll smell cigarettes and I'll know, oh, it's one of my ancestors or it's somebody. Or if you have the clairaudience with the hearing, you may hear like humming or whistling and nobody's around. That's another one that happens a lot. So when you have the smelling clairaudience, that is often an ancestral sign or like a spirit visitation. And you have to then kind of use your other senses in tangent because so say you smell the cigarette smoking and then you hear something and then you feel neutral, that's okay. That's a neutral spirit. But then if you feel like, ooh, it's like something else happening, like, ooh, this is kind of scary, or I'm not really feeling comfortable here, like because your clairsentience is picking it up something. Or if you feel really good, like comfortable, like that's how I know it's my grandpa. Oh, it's grandpa, like that. So you have to pay attention to everything and you'll get a good read on what it is you're experiencing. The next one is the clairgustance, which is clear tasting, which is tasting flavors without eating anything. Spirit might communicate by impressing a favorite food or ritual taste, or sometimes, like if I'm doing my altar and I'm like setting it up, and all of a sudden I'll have like a craving or a taste for something that is not something I would ordinarily eat. And so then I know, oh, okay, the spirits of the altar want this, and I'll do my best to get it. If it's not something like hard to find, because sometimes there is a story of a woman who went to go see the shaman, and before she even did the reading, the shaman said, you need to go get me this moon cake, this like kind of special rice cake. And she said, okay, I'll go find it. And she had to go to like 10 different stores to find this because it wasn't like something that was readily available. And so she went back to the shaman, brought the moon cake, and the shaman told her, well, you're going to meet somebody next month, blah, 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 blah. You're going to marry. And so she followed that advice and she did meet somebody. And then because of the shaman, she did marry that person. And it ended up being like a horrible marriage. She never wanted to go to a shaman ever again because of that. And that's when you look at that thing about the trickster, because that's how spirit tricked her to marry the person she did, to have the children she did, to live the life she did, and then to ultimately, gain freedom and independence. And of course, it wasn't a pleasant thing. But then when you look at the whole totality of it, that was her destiny. It was her destiny to find the shaman, to find the mooncake, to get the reading, to go through that whole experience. Because if it wasn't her destiny, she wouldn't have gone that path, even though it wasn't. See, and this is what I mean about life. It's not always what you want, it's the medicine you need. And a lot of times that's how the spirit world will work. It'll say, you need to do this, and it'll like literally trick you. And sometimes you'll see it later, like, oh, okay, that was the blessing, but ugh, that was an awful experience. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll just stay in that space of bitterness and sadness and like, ah, I wish I wouldn't have never listened to that lady. All right. So beyond the clairs and other psychic gifts, there are one time I did a ceremony and I printed out all the different types of psychic gifts somebody could have, and it was pages and pages and pages and pages. And we're just going to touch on some of the main ones, but we're not going to go into the pages and pages and pages. You could Google that. But there's psychometry, which is reading energy through objects. So sometimes if you go to a medium, they'll say, okay, bring me a picture, bring me a watch, or bring me a ring or something. Most mediums, if they're really good, you wouldn't need that, but it might enhance, kind of like a crystal. It might like make it um, more clear. It might make it more profound, depending. And then there's precognition, which is seeing or sensing future events before they occur. A lot of people have that, where, you can't control that one, because when you have precognition, it's just poof, I saw something, or I felt something, or I had a dream about it. And that was something you needed to see and convey. Telepathy. Telepathy is the direct mind-to-mind communication, often with loved ones or soul connections, often with people, especially if you're in a relationship with somebody for a long time, you can have that, or your child. Uh, Telepathy, I feel like in the future is just going to be normal, especially with technology. I think technology is really going to push that gift to a new level. But that's the way our ancestors communicated. Telepathy is in our bones. Channeling. Now, channeling allows spirits, ancestors, or higher beings to speak through you. There's two different types of channeling. There's where you're completely um, out of it, where you don't even know. It's just like a possession. Or there's like where you're in the back seat. You just take the back seat and you let the spirit come in and through you. And then there's dream walking. Dream walking you can practice. It's entering others' dreams or journeying through dream time. This is really common with shamanic practices. But dream walking is how the Aboriginals of Australia would know where to travel, because they would go into a dream state and then they would, as a tribe, go walk together to see where they're going to go. And then, as a unified field, they would follow that dream. And they're the masters of dream walking. But that's a very common practice. And you may have had that as a child. If you were a sleepwalker, if you suffered from sleep paralysis, if you had dreams that were very vivid and showed you things about other people, or if you popped into other people's dreams and then later it was confirmed that they also had that same dream. Hey, we were dream walking last night. I know, I saw you. We were at the river. You're a dream walker. Animal communication, which is most typical with the psychic gifts, or mediumship. If you're a medium, most likely you're an animal communicator. Some people just specialize in animal communication, which is speaking with animals on an intuitive soul level, connecting with past animals, connecting to current health problems. I mean, if you can connect to humans, you can connect to animals. Mediumship is direct communications with those who've crossed into the spirit world, but also when you go deeper into the path of mediumship, mediumship is the ability to understand the spirit realms, and then shamans take it to the next level and extract and help the dead who are stuck, who need crossing over, who are influencing the relatives that are currently living. There's a whole thing about mediumship, and in later podcasts, I might go deeper into that. That's a course that I teach. And mediumship is, in the West, mediumship is more for entertainment. But in the East and throughout other parts of the world, mediumship is powerful. It's not just let me talk to grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, and bring a message and make everybody cry. It's about healing generational pain, suffering, healing the deeper roots and why people suffer mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically because of unresolved grief and trauma and karma. And when you can not just speak to the dead, but clear and heal and help the unresolved dead person move to another realm, that's true mediumship. It's going from just the messenger to the healer, and not just the healer for the living, but also for the dead. And when you look at Buddhist texts and scriptures about Buddha and his ability, that's what he was doing. He had 88,000 teachings, and a lot of those teachings were about how he was healing and working in other realms with different spirit beings. The next one is healing, hands and touch, healing and moving energy through palms. Can be spontaneous, can be done as a practice, can be something that you become really good at and known for. And it can go with a lot of those other different gifts we talked about. The healing of hands and touch has become really popular in the last few decades with Reiki and the different methodologies that, like Barbara Brennan's Hands of Light and that kind of stuff. But I say, like, a lot of times when you're, healing with your hands, you could also be an artist. You could also be a craftsman, a carpenter. Um, there's a lot of different ways that healing happens with the hands that is not just energetic, but foundational and building. Like Jesus was a carpenter kind of thing. All right, so let's go into shamans, healers, and mediums and just briefly go through some of those. I think here in the West, the word shaman, it's kind of like the word psychic. When you hear it, it's like, oh, people roll their eyes or whatever. Or some people are just like, oh, a shaman, ho. And I always say it's just because in America we have a lack of words for any kind of healing, any kind of psychic, any kind of anything. We don't have that ancient base like other cultures do. If you go into the indigenous world, every tribe has a different name for what they're going to call their medicine people, and they'll never use the word shaman. They get insulted by the word shaman because it's not their culture. Shaman comes from the Eastern Seaboard. It's from places like Siberia, Mongolia. Um, Shaman for me, it relates to my Korean heritage because that's where our heritage came from, was that part of the world. It went from Siberia to Mongolia to Korea, and it just traveled on down, and it became its own unique form of healing. But the protocols and the basics are everlasting. Since the beginning of time to the end of time, they will be the same, despite the many changes that shamanism has went through. And then on the other side of me, I have Danae, and then I have Pueblo, and both of my lineages have healers, and so those were medicine people. And I think in this modern world, I talk a lot about this, especially if you're multicultural, which many of us in America are. It's a hard place because you're not just walking in between worlds, but you're also walking in between cultures, and you face like that visceral hatred sometimes from both sides, such as, well, no, you can't use the word shaman. No, you can't use this word. You can't say that. You can't work with that. You can't. But how can you not when it's your ancestry? How can you not when it's the land you're living on? because as a shaman, you have all the clairs, right? And you journey into other realms. You read symbols, nature, ancestral lines. Every shaman is a little different, but shamans work with spirit, and we can't dictate who and what spirit wants to work with us that we're ready to work with. And part of it is your blood and your lineage and your culture, and then part of it is the land you're on, and part of it is just the calling. So it's not divided like in a human realm where it's like, oh, you're this ethnicity, that. Now, if you're following a traditional path where you're a Korean Mudong and that's all you're going to do, then that might be what you do. But if you're living in America as a Korean Mudong shaman, you probably will have other experiences with other spirits, and that's okay. Because I feel like when you are on a shamanic path, you should experience the totality of it. Shamans often travel the world. Like I've traveled all over and experienced all kinds of spirits, all kinds of deities, all kinds of healings, all kinds of people. And what I learned early on in this work is that the basic human needs are the same. Whether you're sitting in a mansion in Beverly Hills or a war zone in the Middle East, the questions are literally the same. And I learned this because I did these email readings from people all over the world. And I remember there was this moment where I got this email request, and it was a woman in a war zone in the Middle East, and she was asking if her husband was cheating on her. And at the same time, I had this lady in Beverly Hills, very wealthy, asking the same question. And it was that aha moment where it's like, wow, it doesn't matter where you are, your questions are the same. It's the same thing with spirit, no matter where you are. The basics of spirit never change. So then we have the word healer, which is often expressed through clairsentience, the empath, and healing touch, and they feel and transmute energy. That's the basics of a healer. Most shamans do that, but some people it's just a healer. They do that too. And a lot of healers have other clair gifts, but that's the basic of a healer. A healer is someone when you feel bad, you go to. So it doesn't matter what you call yourself, or if you're somebody where suddenly somebody's in a bad mood, they dump all their problems on you, and they're, I feel so much better. You're a healer. It's really straightforward. And mediums are the ones who have most of the clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and they bring the departed loved ones into, messages from the departed loved ones. They communicate to the spirit world. And see, most mediums connect to the spirits next door, like I call it, where they're not far. When you start working with mediums who connect with angels or ascended masters or enlightened beings, or like kind of those spirit guides, that kind of thing, that's different than what most people perceive. They don't perceive those people as mediums, but they are. Most people perceive mediums as people who connect to ancestors, ghosts, spirits next door, spirits right in front of us, that if you just closed your eyes, you could see. And yeah, it's a different gift though, but this is the truth of it though. Not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychic. So if you're a medium, you also have psychic gifts. Not all psychics are mediums. And especially if someone is using cards, they're not a medium. Even if they call themselves a medium. In the professional realms, if you want to charge money and have clients, you cannot use those types of tools. That's somehow here in the West, that's not necessarily the case, but across the world, if you go into any culture that has this as part of the culture, no professional, fully initiated shaman, healer, medium, whatever, uses cards or, what do you call it, your fingers, your hand. Those are not considered fully initiated. Those are skills or things you can learn. When we're talking about shamans, healers, mediums, these are things that you cannot learn. These are things you're given and then develop. Like if you have a gift for music and then you develop it, that's what we're talking about. So some empowered healers will hold all three, walking as vision keepers, energy channels, and messengers. But some will just go one route and plow down it. And the thing about it is that when you have multi gifts, the whole world will say you have to niche down, you have to, find one thing you're good at and just make a billion videos on it, and that's your whole life. But when you're someone who has these types of intuitive gifts, you never know where the road is going to bend. You can't put yourself in this limited box. You have to expand it and grow it and follow your road, not somebody else's road. So, some journaling questions that I would invite you to go deeper into is, which Clair resonated with you? Have you been ignoring it or dismissing it? When have you felt or sensed something beyond the five senses? And how did you respond? A lot of times people have these gifts and they freak out. You see a shadow. Oh my gosh, what's that shadow? Oh no. And we have to get beyond that. But when you dive in, when you lean in, when you just go beyond the little uncomfortable part, there's like a whole world waiting. I know every time I do a ceremony, there's that moment where the veil drops and my human mind is dropping and I'm entering into the spirit world. And I'm always like, oh, why do I do this to myself? Oh, there's like that moment of resistance. And then once I really fully surrender into it, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is awesome. Why do I do that? So it's kind of like that. Do you fear your psychic gifts, or are you ready to embrace them? And maybe perhaps, through this conversation, you kind of thought about things and thought, oh, I didn't know I really had that gift. I guess I do. Yeah, I have experienced that before. Huh. You may have that too. In what ways do you already act as shaman, healer, or medium, even if you don't name it that way? In what ways do you already have those characteristics? Well, every gift is sacred. Every sense is a doorway. The empowered healer path is not about comparing or competing, but about honoring your soul's way of perceiving. And as you step into this series, remember you carry medicine. Your psychic senses are not random, they are the language of spirit, whispering through your body, your heart, your mind. In our next episodes, we will walk deeper into the unique paths of the shaman, the healer, and the medium, and you will begin to see where your soul feels most at home. So I hope today's journey helped you and awaken some truths within your soul. And be sure to check in for the next episodes where we go deeper into these topics. Until then, may you trust your senses, honor your knowing, and step boldly as the empowered healer you are. Until we meet again, many blessings. Aho.